Hello, I'm really glad you joined me today. I hope you'll watch this or other videos like it a couple of times because today we're going to do the thing that everybody has trouble with. And really what we're doing is we are reinterpreting or interpreting, translating some English phrases into math phrases. And this is difficult. This is really difficult. We're used to doing math, and math is easy, and I can add, subtract, multiply, and divide. But now all of a sudden we're going to say, hey, let's change the topic. You're becoming a math translator today. Well, it's not as hard as it looks. I want to show you how to do this. We have lots of examples, but understand this, that it is a vocabulary driven activity, which means you need to know what these words mean. And I'm not going to give you all the words you need. I'm not going to give you the whole list of vocabulary words. You'll find that in your textbook. So look up that list of vocabulary words and just become familiar with it. And the more familiar you are, the easier these will become. Okay, let's just go through the steps. We're translating, so every time I see a word, I'm going to say, what does that mean in math? So for example, 5, what does that mean in math? Well, that just means 5, the number 5. Subtracted from. Subtracted from means minus, but it means the other way around, right? 5 is going to be subtracted from, so it means minus 5. So this actually means minus 5 from something else. So next phrase, a number. Now a number is, well, what number is that? Do you know what number that is? I don't know. What do we do when we don't know what the number is? A number that we don't know, we use a variable. So we could use x, we might use n, sometimes it'll tell us what to use. It doesn't in this case. Then equals, that's equal sign. And then 10, of course, is the number 10. So if you take 5 and subtract it from a number x, it equals 10. We would write that sentence as x minus 5 equals 10. And that's it. That's how you set up this problem. Now, notice that this actual problem is an equation. We know it's an equation because it had the equal sign in it, and therefore we can solve the problem. So now that I have x minus 5 equals 10, I can solve this. What's being done to x is being subtracted by 5, so I'll add 5 to both sides, and I get x equals 15. And now notice that's the solution to the equation that I made up. But did you hear what I just said? I made this up. I made up the variable. Nobody told me what the variable was. I just made it up. So really the answer to the question is, although it didn't say, it should have said what is the question, what is the number? The number is 15. So that's the answer to the question. I guess we didn't really ask the question, what is the number? But a number is, the a number is 15. And the equation that we used to find or solve that, find that number is x minus 5 equals 10. Okay, notice there was a lot of math going on, a lot of different skills that we're using in these kinds of problems, and that's why they're so difficult. But if you just think of it one skill at a time, I think you can do these. First, let's do our translation skills here. The quotient, what on earth does that mean? Well, quotient is a fancy word. There's actually 4 words for the different operations, right? We've got addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. And there's 4 special words that mean that, and that fall into one category. The 4 words are sum, difference, product, and quotient, one we're using here. And all of these mean, they mean whatever it is that they mean, adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing, but they also mean the answer. And so these all mean put whatever it is that you're doing here in parentheses, because what we're going to do is we're going to do something with that answer. So the quotient of 8 and a number means take that 8 and that number, I'll call it n just for variety, and write those two things as a division problem. So 8 divided by n. I like, in general, we just put them in order. So the first number divided by the second number. 8 divided by n, and then we'll put that in parentheses. Doesn't matter in this equation, but it will in future equations. Is equals -2. So equals -2. So there's my equation. 8 over n equals -2. Now this one is actually a bit of a trick problem, because what's being done to n in my equation here, well, technically the n is doing something to 8, and so the better way to solve this problem is to multiply both sides by n, because that will get the n out from the denominator and move it into the numerator. So now we end up with 8 equals -2n. Now I can say what's being done to n, being multiplied by -2, so I'll divide by -2, and n equals -4 is what I think the answer is. And then I'll go back to my original problem, or my original equation, and I'll just check it. 8 divided by -4 equals -2, and that's true. Okay, so the number is -4. Again, remember, the variable n is something I just brought to the table. I brought that n here. I just said a number, let's call it n, but nobody told me that n was the number. So I use that as a convenience, as a placeholder, until I figured out what the number is, and the number is -4. Okay, we're going to come back to those sum, difference, product, and quotients in a little bit. But let's keep on doing our translations here. 2, that's easy, added to, plus, twice, what's that mean? Twice means 2 times. 2 times. 2 times what? A number, let's go with Q this time. A number gives, ooh, what does gives mean? Gives is a euphemism, a synonym for equals. That's we're really scraping the bottom of the barrel here, trying to come up with other words for equals, and there's just not that many. Is the big one. Gives, that works. -14, -14. Okay, so 2 plus 2 times Q equals -14. That's an equation. I can solve that equation. First, I'll put a box around it because that's part of the answer to the question. The question is, what is the equation that's being described here? And then we'll solve the equation. We can subtract 2 from both sides. We get 2Q equals -16. Then we'll divide by 2. And Q equals -8. And we think that's the answer. We'll try it in our equation. Trying it in the equation doesn't tell us that we got the equation right, but it tells us that we did the solving right. So 2 plus 2 times -8 equals -14. Well, 2 times -8 is -16. Plus 2 is -14, and that's true. Okay, so Q does equal -8, so the number is -8. So we have our equation, and then we solve the equation. There's a couple more. 3 times the difference. Okay, so 3 times multiplication, the difference. Ooh, that's one of those secret words. The difference means subtraction. Subtraction of two things. The answer to subtraction, two things being subtracted. What are the two things? Of 7 and a number. So the two things being subtracted are the number 7 and another number which we don't know. We'll just call it n. Amounts to, oh that's clever, amounts to equals is negative 40. So there we have it. 3 times 7 minus n equals negative 40. Notice that the difference is being subtracted, but it just gives you the two numbers we're subtracting afterwards. So 7 and a number, the two numbers, and so we just assume that means in order, 7 minus n, 7 and the number in order, 7, the first one minus the second one. Okay, so we can simplify. Here's my equation. Let's put a box around it, because if the question just said what's the equation, there it is. Now we'll distribute that 3 to the 7 and the negative n, and we'll get 21 minus 3n equals negative 40. We'll subtract 21 from both sides, and that gives me negative 3n equals negative 61. And we'll divide by negative 3, and n equals, now this is a bit of a problem, I apologize, this is probably a bad question or a mistype somewhere, but a negative divided by a negative is positive, and if we did this on the calculator we get 20.3 repeating, which is 20 and a third. But if we wanted to, we could just leave it as 61 thirds. So either any of these answers are fine. I'll try not to give you ones with decimal answers or non-reducible fractions. Just yet, we're going to do fractions in another in a little bit. Okay, bad example. We'll try to forget that one, but it was tricky. Twice a number, so 2 times b. Let's call the number b. 2 times a number subtracted from, oh no, we're subtracting 2b from something, what, 60, is equals 20. So twice a number subtracted from 60 equals 20. So first we're going to get rid of that 60 by subtracting 60 from both sides. And we get negative 2b equals negative 40. Then we'll divide both sides by the negative 2. And we'll get b equals positive 20. Now we think that's the answer, but let's check it. 60 minus 2 times 20 equals 20. 2 times 20 is 40, so that's 60 minus 40 equals 20, and that's certainly true. So the number is 20. That's my final answer. That's my final solution, and here is the equation that I had to set up to get that solution. Okay, last one. Oh no, there's 2 more. Oh no, there's more than 2. Woohoo, there's lots. Okay, let's do one more translation one, then we'll do some more practical word problems that are a little bit trickier. 5 times the sum, something being added here, so we're adding some things. The sum means we're adding a couple of things, and we're going to add those together first before we do anything else. So the sum means the answer we're going to get once we add these two things together. So the sum of some number z plus 2. Ooh, that was a little bit of a cheat there. So it says the sum of some number plus 2, but so that plus there was a redundancy. The sum of, so 5 times the sum of a number, we could have said and 2. We didn't need the plus. That's okay. And 2 is equal to 8 times the number, wait, what number? The number we don't know, z, the same number as the other, the number, some number, minus 11. Find the number. Now, notice that I had to use 2 lines for this. This is a really long word problem. It's a long description, but that's okay. I'm just going to write it all out in 1 line now. 5 times the sum of z plus 2 is equal to 8 times z minus 11. All right, this is a really complicated problem. We're going to distribute the 5 because of that word, the sum. The sum means that we're probably going to have to distribute 5z plus 10 equals 8z minus 11. Now I have z's on both sides. I want to get rid of one of them, and I'll get rid of the smaller one, so minus 5z from both sides gives me 10 equals 3z minus 11. Now it's down to a 2-step problem. I want to get rid of that minus 11. I'll add 11 to both sides. And then 3z equals 21. I'm going to get rid of that times 3 by division. Divide by 3. And I end up with z equals 7. Z equals 7. So now I go back to my original, well, what I think is my original equation. 5 times the sum of z plus 2 equals 8 times z minus 11. I'll just plug in the 7 there. So 5 times 7 plus 2 equals 8 times 7 minus 11. Well, 7 plus 2 is 9, so 5 times 9. And 8 times 7, let's see, 6 is 40, 56. 56 minus 11. Okay, 5 times 9 is 45. And 56 minus 11 is 45 also, so there we go, it works. The number is 7. And there's the equation I set up. So again, watch out for these. The question could be focused on what's the equation, or it could be focused on what's the answer, but you have to show the equation in order to get full credit on these, because this is all about writing an equation. Okay, now, these ones are also about writing an equation, but it's a little bit trickier, and sometimes it's easier to kind of come up with the answer without the equation on the easy ones. But trust me, it is worth your time to puzzle out the equations for these, because as these problems get more and more complicated, pretty soon the equation is the only way to solve them. So it's really important that you practice setting up equations at this stage. A crow will eat 5 times more ounces of food a day than a finch. If together they eat 13 ounces of food, how many ounces of food the crow consumes and how many ounces of food does the finch consume? Okay, that was a little bit awkwardly worded, but that's okay. Notice that there's 2 things that we don't know here. How many ounces of food the crow consumes and how many ounces of food the finch consumes. So I'm going to say C for the crow, crow's food, and F for the finch's food. So this first sentence, a crow will eat 5 more ounces of food than a finch. So a crow will eat what? C equals 5 more than what? A finch. So C equals F plus 5. The second sentence, if together, add them up, they eat 13 ounces of food. C plus F equals 13. Now, this is where these ones are a little bit tricky, because we now know what C equals, so instead of writing C, I can write F plus 5. And that's what I'm going to do in my second equation. C is F plus 5 plus, right, that's C, plus F equals 13. Now, F plus 5 plus F is 2F plus 5. Hopefully you're fairly confident. Once you get the equation, you can solve it. Now we'll subtract 5 from both sides. 2F equals 8. So F equals, divide by 2, 4. So remember, the F stands for how much the finch eats. So finches 4 ounces. And then the crow eats 5 more, F plus 5, so crows eat 9 ounces. And 4 plus 9 is 13, so this works out. Last question. A tractor and a plow attachment are worth $1,200. The tractor is worth 7 times as much money as the plow. Find the value of the tractor and the value of the plow. So once again, we actually have 2 unknowns here. The value of the tractor and the value of the plow. And these values are going to be measured with money. And so together, the 2 values, T plus P, are $1,200. And that's the first sentence here. The tractor is worth 7 times as much as the plow. So T equals 7 times P. So now that I know what T is 7 times P, I can replace all my T's with 7 times P. So 7P plus P equals 1,200. And now I have an equation with just one variable, P. 7P plus 1P equals 1,200. That's 8P equals 1,200. And then I'll pull out my calculator, divide both sides by 8. 1,200 divided by 8 is 150. So P equals 150. So the plow is $150. The tractor is 7 times that, so 7 times 150 is 1,050. $1,050. And together they add up to 1,200, so this makes sense. And we'll just say again that when you answer a word question, you should give a word answer. And sometimes the word answer was a little bit anonymous. The unknown number is 7. But if the question is about specific things, plows, tractors, finches, crows, ounces, and dollars, then we need our answers to include that information. Thank you so much for watching, and I know you're going to do great on these.